You want to paint some cool glowy effects on your models, but feel like you don't have the time or the skills to try object source lighting, or OSL for short, then fear not, for that's exactly what this video is for. I'm going to show you how to do that, and I'm going to do it with a humble dry brush. I'm Peachy, and this is Peachy Tips. So, what is object source lighting? For those of you not in the know, it is when you cast light on some kind of form, whether that being a miniature in this case, and let's say the source is like a glowing weapon, like a lightsaber or a magical blade or a torch or something like that. And you want that effect, that glow, that colour to kind of cascade across the model, but only in certain areas, otherwise it might look a bit weird. And that's to reflect that cool effect that you get from lighting, which is what OSL is. A lot of experts use this for exhibition painting. It looks mega, they do amazing jobs, but that doesn't mean us mere mortals can't do it. And that is the point of this video, is to show you some really quick, simple techniques using a dry brush where you can do this effect in a speedy kind of way for your own collections, whether that's you like want to add a cool effect to like your power blades or your magical blades for your Stormcast or whatever, or your lightsabers on any Star Wars figures you may have, because they deserve to glow too. Now, all you're going to need for this is some reference, whether that's a photo with like some light or whatever that's on a model, or a picture that you're like, oh, I want to try and make my blade look like that. Obviously, you need a model and a dry brush if you can. Dry brushes are perfect for this, and the reason being is I've been doing this for years, and I find when I'm using a dry brush to do my cheap and quick object source lighting, is it's a really good way of picking out those raised areas that certainly if the light's cascading across a model, it just picks it out, and then you can work from that. That's your guiding light, if you like. Guiding light. Wasn't meant to be a pun, but I'll keep it in. So yes, that's all you really need, is some reference and a dry brush, as well as the other tools that you normally paint with. So let's begin with a test model. So I've got a model that I painted ages ago. I based it because it was like for a quick game. But it's got like a bit of a sickly blade. It's a Chaos chosen guy for Age of Sigmar. But I want to do a cool glowy effect, like a sickly green effect. Across this video as well, across the three models I'm going to paint, it's going to cover green, red and blue, which tends to be the most colours people use. The red, you can kind of go to oranges and yellows later on if you want to do the fiery effect, but they tend to be like the most popular ones. But if you want to do purples or turquoises, you kind of just follow the steps and it will kind of make sense. But yes, we're going to do this test model. The reason being is it's good if you, especially not if you're new to this, it's a good way of like testing it out and also getting an idea, like if you're doing multiples in a unit, of how far to push it, because there is a danger sometimes when you're doing this, you can go a bit too far and get carried away, which I kind of do a little bit with this one, which is why it's a test model. So let's paint a Chaos chosen Ensorcelled blade, Ensorcelled Mace. So there we are, here's my little test model that I did a while back. So I'm just going to repaint that blade, getting a selection of greens. There's a few here I'm going to pick from, but I don't want too dark, so I'm going to go for those mid-tone greens. So I'm going to get green skin first, just get some out on the palette. This is going to be an overbrush to start off with, so not like a dry brush. So I'm just going to base coat over that mace. I mean, you could do this with a smaller brush. I'm just doing this because it's kind of isolated on its own, so I don't need to worry too much about being neat here. So once I've got that all base coated, it's then a matter of doing a little bit of dry brushing. So as always, you know, I'm using tissue here because that's easily accessible for most people, but if you've got some wood or one of those special dry palettes, use that. And then what I'm going to start doing is just directionally around the area, dry brushing on the raised areas. This is where obviously most of the light will start to catch. I can work a bit heavier in places as I get closer to the light source. Yeah, using the dry brush is just a really good method of going, yep, light's catching this edge, the light's catching that edge, and then you just work your way down. Sometimes, yep, you can get a bit carried away. So what I'm now going to do is get that same green skin colour. I'm going to thin it down. I'm using like 1 part paint, 5 parts water. Again, you can just play around with how thin it is. I don't want it too thick, so almost like the same consistency of a contrast. I'm going to paint this over. It's going to do 2 things. It's going to tint those areas around where the glow is into more of a green tone. It looks a bit messy at the moment, but trust me, when it dries, it'll look fine. It also will stop any of that dry brushing area looking a bit too dry and powdery or chalky. So it's a really nice way of just knocking that back a bit as well. But yeah, I'm just applying it to the general glow area. And like you see, any area that's got like red armor, it's giving it a bit of a green tint, but you can still see it's red underneath, or was red. But the glow's just like slightly changing that. So that's all I'm doing here, is just changing the hue or the tint, if you like. And of course, as you develop and build the glow around it, you'll start picking other areas going, yep, that needs a bit of a glow. Yep, that needs a bit of a glow. A little bit of experimentation. But as you can see there, where it's now dry, it looks fine. So what I'm going to do now is just do some other areas that I think need a bit of work. So I think the face will need a bit more work. This is the point of doing a test as well. Like, yep, that looks like a nice glow, but I think I could pick some on the face. I can probably pick some a bit further across here or whatever. So that's the purpose of just doing a second go. Then I'm going to get a lighter green, and I'm just going to, so this is wild green, so it's a little bit lighter than that green skin. I'm just going to start going over the edges of the mace, and then I'll work to some of the edges on the armour as well. This is just like a little subtle dry brush, just to give a bit more punch to the edges. So it's almost a highlight, basically. Highlight to your glow. So just work your way around, doing that dry brush in. Again, take your time, no rushing. Then I get some rainforest, which is a far more punchier green. It's got a bit more yellowiness to it, which is going to really help give that sickly kind of green glow going on as well. So I'm just doing the same thing here, just dry brushing over. Again, I'm being a bit lighter with this as well as opposed to the last one, because obviously I don't want to overdo too much and then undo everything I've just done previously. So I'm happy enough with that. Now in some places the highlights might be a bit too light or it's a bit chalky, so I'm just going to get that initial colour I used for the dry brushing, which is green skin. I'm just going to thin that down, or use that same mix that you've got on your palette, and then just in some of the recesses just knock it back a little bit. It's not going to hide or remove those yellowy green highlights, it's just going to knock them back a little bit so you've got a bit more transition. And as you continue doing this, you'll start to see when it dries, it's giving a really nice effect, and it does look a bit glowy. Now to add a bit more glow, certainly in the centre of that mace, I'm just going to get some of that rainforest, thin it down, and then just drop it in. That'll give a bit more of an otherworldly, evil, sickly glow, I think, or at least help add towards that. And then just using that rainforest again, this is now just a highlight. You don't have to do this, this is like a next step kind of thing where you can just pick out some of the edges, just rivets here if you want to, or like some definitions. If you make mistakes, wipe with your finger like I did there, but just on some of the edges just for a crisper highlight. Again, like I say, this is like a next step kind of thing. You don't have to stress about doing this. On the mace, you could use the edge of your brush if you're not happy with some of those edge highlights or the dry brushing that you've done. So just use the edge of your brush, run it along. Again, that will give it a bit more punch to the blade. Again, take your time, no stressing. If you find that you've gone a bit too far with some of those highlights, just get that green skin again that's already thinned down in your palette, just go over, knock it back a bit. And then of course I'm going to do some extra highlights on the face, just because I want to add some definition to things like the cheekbones, the nose, brow, that kind of stuff. That will just help define the face, because most people tend to focus on the face anyway, so you want to at least show some of that definition. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some rainforest and some white and just mix it together. You could find a lighter green if you want to, a really pale pastel green, but I add some white on the palette anyway, so I just mix the two together, 50-50. You don't have to be 100% precise. I just wanted a lighter, more pastel green that's closer to white, and I'm just really thinning that down and then just running that into the recesses of that central bit, just to give it a bit more of a glow, or at least add a bit more punch to that. And there we are. There is our Chaos Chosen with his Ensorcelled blade glowing from his left side. So the Chaos guy I'd done, that was just a test model. That was just for, you know, a bit of a warm-up. In hindsight, maybe I went a bit too far in some areas. That's fine. Using the dry brush is so key to getting those raised areas, and using that same colour that I dry brush with then is like a wash or a bit of a glaze to go in those recesses. Does two things: tones down the colour of whatever you painted, gives it a bit more of a tint of that green, but also stops too much of the chalkiness from the dry brush as well. Yeah, because that can happen. I mean, if you add a bit more water to your dry brushing, which takes a little bit of time and getting used to, cover that in another video, just do dry brushing as you normally would, because you're there to pick out the raised bits. Right, let's move on to painting Anakin's glowy lightsaber effect. Talking of Anakin's lightsaber, thank you NSabers for sending me Anakin's lightsaber. Apparently someone took it off his barbecued body at Mustafa, so I hope he doesn't come looking for it. If he does, I'll hide my son. You do get used to the functions. They are quite intuitive. There's like, if you press the lower part, it cycles through the different lightsaber colors. You press the top part, it ignites the lightsaber, lowers it down. If you do ignite it and you press the bottom part, it does like cool flashy effects like deflecting blasters and stuff. What I'm going to do is just turn the lights down in the next scene, and I'm going to ignite a lightsaber. I'm back. It's a bit darker, but let me risk a little more light. Oh yeah, I've turned the volume off this lightsaber because they are quite loud. They are operated by a single button. Takes you a while to get used to it, but they are very, very well designed. So yes, so this is perfect for getting that kind of, well, lighting effect that you're after. Depending on what kind of colour clothing you wear, that will also affect the end result as well. So if you've got like greys like I have, the light on the grey will look a bit different to maybe on a black or on a white or something like that. So if you are painting models and you're like, not quite sure what that light effect will look like, get yourself some form of LED or an Ensaber lightsaber. Really useful for effects, as you can see, especially if you do it like against armor. Again, it'll vary on the light source, how dark it is, how bright it is. Really useful for reference when you're painting your figures. Stand in front of a mirror, get your smartphone, take some shots, or your partner takes some shots of you whilst holding a lightsaber. If you are trying to up your game on object source lighting, get yourself a lightsaber. It's a little bit better than like a LED box light strapped to a stick, and also has all the colours in the world and all the cool effects, and you've got a lightsaber and you can run around and fight your mates. Or not. It's entirely up to you. Oh yeah, that was Yoda's colour. I know it's Anakins. I may have reprogrammed a few by accident and lost blue, so I need to cycle through that. Oh, you know what? Let's show you how to quickly change the colours on them. It took me a while to figure it out, but I'm just going to turn my lightsaber right round. And then, apparently, if you have the on button and then you press the big square in the middle, like so, and then you twist it, it changes the colour. I've gone purple for Mace Windu. Oh, I've gone blue. There we are. Got Anakin's blue. I keep looking at the viewfinder to make sure I'm in sharp, because obviously I also want to have a look at the blue effects, see if it's actually cascading light on me. But yeah, NSabers, thank you for sending that through. And if you're interested and you want a lightsaber, check out the NSabers. Link is in the description, like I said. And of course, 7% off. Okay, so I've talked enough about lightsabers. Let's move on to giving Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber a glow up. So here's my Anakin. Really proud of this guy. Love him in his Clone Wars armor. So yep, it's now time to bite the bullet and give him a glow. So what I'm going to do here is just look at a range of blues that just kind of match him with his lightsaber, because I use different colors then. And then I'm going to start off with that crystal blue. Very much like the Chaos guy. I'm just going to start working in the general area where that glow will come from. Again, using my Drybrush to help pick out those raised areas. I'm starting off quite subtle to start off with, and then work out going, oh, there's a little bit more that needs doing here, a little bit more that needs doing there. So again, just take your time, work your way around, and then you can just add. I think in this case, because his blade is down, less is more. I don't need loads around his face or his shoulders. It's mostly going to be like his waist downwards. So what I'm now going to do is move on to a lighter blue, and again, very much like the green glow, is just subtly pick out some of those edges. Again, I can always add more to this if I think it needs a little bit more punch or whatever. But I'm also going to start picking out the grass, because that and the base generally where his blade will be. So I feel that needs a bit of a glow too. So I'm just going to work in that general area. I guess imagine a sphere where the light's going to touch. Depends up to you how big that sphere is, really. I'm being very mindful not to try and get that on his lightsaber, but if I did, I can tidy it up. What I'm now going to do is get that initial blue I used as a base coat, the initial Drybrush, thin that down, again very much like I did with the green, say 5 parts water, 1 part paint, and then I'm just going to go over and then just knock back some of those areas to get rid of the chalkiness, but also to tint like the reds and that darker blue and the browns and stuff with a bit more of a blue hue. Again, you'll still see those colours punching through, so you'll still see the red punching through. It just gives it that tint. It's like a filter almost, I suppose, for a better word. Initially when it's wet it doesn't look like that, but when it dries, just trust the system. Trust the system. I'll do a little bit on the base as well, so it looks like it's got a bit of a glow to it. Maybe areas where the light will catch, not the shadow. Then I'm just going to go back over a little bit more of that Arctic gem, just a little bit here and there. Just pick out some of the edges. Sometimes it is a matter of just picking a little bit here, picking a little bit there, washing. And then the very lighter blue, which is bright sapphire, I'm just going to use that to pick out some of the extremities on his like glove, vambrace, bits of the edge of the cloth as well, just because it's probably getting close to the light source, or it's more defined edges and stuff. That's really what that last colour's for, really, is just to help define some of those really sharp edges, especially when they're getting closer to the light source. And if needs be, in some of those recesses, just get that crystal blue, which is your initial colour to start off with, that's already thinned down on the palette, and then just knock things back or whatever. Sometimes it is judging it by eye. One moment you're like, yep, that's fine, and in other areas you're like, oh, that could do a little bit more. Again, that's why reference is key. Just check out the reference. And there we are, our Clone Wars Anakin Skywalker is now fully equipped with a glowing blade. Very chuffed with that. Right, well, I'm pretty pleased with how his lightsaber came out. There's a couple of things I'll do differently. I think I went a bit over the top with the wrist up to the forearm, so I'll probably need to knock that back with a bit of a paint job here and there. It's not much, it'll just be like getting some blacks and browns, thin them down a bit and just glazing back over that blue, because it will just make it a little bit more subtle. I think I just went a bit too bright on that, because it almost stops at the leather vambrace, and then it doesn't really touch. It kind of needs to bleed into the cloth a bit, or just be about halfway on the vambrace. So that's just something that I've just looked at myself after finishing the model, doing the 360, going, yeah, you know what, that's probably a bit too much on that side. And that, you know, that's part and parcel of doing this kind of stuff. And also the base, maybe I went a bit too far on the base. I kind of like the base. I like the glow on the grass as well, and that was just really simple, just doing a little dry brush of the blue on there. And that's the key thing as well, is starting off with an initial colour and then work your way through some of those brighter tones. And sometimes you might swap and change, depends on the colour you want. What I'm going to do now is something a bit more fun. So I've got a squat, and this could be used for anything like Necrons, Chaos, whatever. But you get these kind of conceptualized armies where people like do like stone stormcast with like glowy green eyes, they've got moss on them, or they just do like stony kind of sandstone and they've just got like a glowy sort of blade or something like that. So what I'm going to do here is use red as my colour. I'm going to pick out a source, which is the hammer, and then just have that cascade its glow across the model. And that's really the only thing I'd do to this model after I've based it. So it's technically 2 colours, but it's a really nice way of getting a bit of speed. And then if there's any other light sources on it, like buttons and stuff, you can always put them out a little bit with like a bit of a brighter tone. But that's what I'm going to do with the squat. Imagine you just want to do an army really quick. You got some Necrons, you want them like in black armor, and then a glowy red blade. Check this out. So here's my random black armored squat that I never finished. Selection of reds that I'm going to probably use. And first of all, I'm going to start with the darker red, which is Basilisk red. So my initial step is just to overbrush on that hammer. That's going to be the source of the light, is going to be the hammer or energy. And then I'm just going to build that red up and then slowly work from that downwards. So once I'm happy enough with obviously covering over the hammer, and then going to start dry brushing downwards, and the general, again, if I imagine a sphere of light, the areas are going to get hit. You might be thinking, but Peachy, you just highlighted all those areas, and now you're kind of going over it. Yeah, I mean, that's part and parcel of this sometimes. If you roughly know what's going to get the light on it, if you're doing this as an army, then maybe don't highlight those sections that you know roughly where the light will be. If this is your test model and you plan on doing more, then you probably won't highlight some of the areas where you know the light source will come from. Once I'm happy with that dry brush and where the source of light is coming from, I'm just going to get that Basilisk red, very much like I've done with the blue and the green, thin it down, same consistency, 5 parts water, 1 part paint, could be less depending on the thickness of the paint. And then I'm just going to go over those areas, not about the chalkiness, but also tint that black to give it a bit more of a red hue. That's the key thing here, is like it does the tint. It doesn't look like it to start off with, but it does. When it dries, you get a bit more of a red filter across it. Yeah, just work your way around, take your time, and just have fun. And there we are, you can see. What I'm going to now do is get a lighter red, pure red. Again, starting from the hammer, source of light, do some dry brushing, and then work my way down. Again, when watching this, you might go, you know what, I'm going to stop at that. That's as far as I'm going to go. I quite like that red or whatever. Then by all means do that. I'm just going to build up to almost oranges, even like orangey yellows, because sometimes it looks quite nice to have like slightly lighter tones picking out here and there. But yeah, once I'm happy with that pure red, I'm now going to move on to angelic red, which is a bit more of an orangey red. Again, like the last few, I'm getting lighter and softer in my dry brushes here, and I'm only keeping it to certain areas. I'm not going all the way. Or as heavy. So yeah, I might pick out like the odd like knuckle here and there, but for the most part it's just keeping it closer to the energy source or light source. I got some lava red. I just wanted to pick out those little rivets here and there. I thought they were lamps at first. That was the initial idea. Do it as like a bit of like, that's maybe where the energy is coming from, but that was me just playing around. And again, chalkiness, you're going to get that, or at least roughness in places, or it might just need a second coat because it's still quite black or whatever. So just get some of that thin down paint, apply it over those areas, knock back a little bit. Some of this is trial and error as well. Again, this is why you do test models. Later on I'll use a yellow. I'm not happy with it and I could probably skip that. What I'm going to do now is get that same colour I just picked out some details with and dry brush that. Weirdly, because I've painted by hand and now dry brushing it, it does give it a different finish, and it's slightly bolder by the hand painted version as opposed to the dry brushed, which is great because you get like multiple different visual finishes from the same paint. Flickering Flame, I did do a heavy dry brush here, and in the end I don't think it really added anything. So although I started to build up that dry brush, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to go straight to Glowing Inferno. It was a bit too subtle, so that's something to bear in mind when you do test models. Sometimes you do a colour and you think, you know, I'll skip that stage. And again, just picking out the lamps and any kind of like little light sources here and there. And then what I'm now going to do, like I did with the Chaos Guy and Anakin, is just pick out like the odd little bit here and there with a brush. Again, you don't have to do this. This is just choice, just for some of those more defined edges. and extremities. And also I was just having fun, really. I was enjoying painting this. But you can leave this guy as it is. This could be your concept colour scheme, and that's it. And there we are. That is our Necromunda squat from the Underhive with his glowy, fiery hammer. Really pleased with that, and based him up, and I'm going to leave him at that. So there we are, just a few examples of how to go about doing some simple glowy effects just by using a little bit of reference and a dry brush. Granted, you know, I did use the same colour and then wash that down as a glaze, but that again wasn't like super taxed. You can use contrast as well and speed paints because they're already pre-thinned. Just find a colour that looks similar to what you've done. Do expect some trial and error. Do get a test model. Do test on old models that you're not too precious about. There is always that anxiety when you are doing this on a model as well. So like when I was doing Anakin, I really like that Anakin because I always think Anakin in his Clone Wars outfit looks great. But when I did it on him, I was a little bit like, whereas the Chaos guy and the squat was just it's black with a bit of like dark blue on it in places, or like blacky blues. So that was never going to be anything other than what it was. And then the Chaos guy was just a test model anyway. But Anakin was a finished figure, and I was happy enough with him. And I was like, I want to do a glow effect on that guy. So you will get that trepidation when you are doing that. But if you've done enough tests, the confidence will build. And if you make mistakes, you know, if you've got your colours noted down, you can always like tidy it back up again if you do make a few mistakes. And I could have easily done that. I know I've got a few tweaks to do on Anakin. It's fine. Mentioned that already, but it's not a problem. I'm not worried about that. Part of that, just a quick word of warning as well, like with my Anakin or like the Chaos guy, sometimes you can go too far. There is a danger that you get carried away, and sometimes you have to stop yourself and like step away from the desk and come back and have a look. Because I've done that many times with blood effects, I've done that many times with like rust effects or oxidization effects and stuff like that. Sometimes, or weathering, in fact, it can be too much. So less is more. Start off small and then build up and then go, I think that's a bit too much now. That is my top tip, really, is just be mindful not to go too far, because then it can look silly. So, but you know, you'll find that with the tests, like I said. I know I keep going about test models, but they are key. As always, thank you again for watching this video. Thank you to NSabers for sending me through a lightsaber that is super bright and multicoloured. I can't wait to dress up as some baddie Sith. I'm never going to be a good guy when I do like Star Wars stuff. I'm always going to be a baddie. But yeah, this is really cool. This is going to probably get the Knight to hold it in videos. That'd be quite cool, wouldn't it? He is in fact a Jedi Knight. Oh yeah. But yes, thank you, NSabers, for sending that through. And like I said, do check out the link. Get yourself 7% off. Christmas is around the corner. So, you know, if you've got loved ones or friends and family that you want to like persuade to get your lightsaber, now's the time. Also, thank you to my beautiful patrons. As always, you guys are amazing. Right, well, I'm going to go off and I'm going to play with my lightsaber in the garden. I might get a knock on the door from the police or the neighbours because I'm making too much noise or just getting a bit silly. Might even get a knock on the door from Anakin Skywalker wanting his lightsaber back. Yeah, that won't be cool. Hopefully he's a good Anakin, because if he's the bad Anakin, don't want him around the house. Heard he's not a great guest. He's a bit moody. Yeah. Yeah. You can reenact. I can do some reenacting now. I've reenacted as that kind of knight. I can reenact as a Jedi Knight. Can you reenact, though, as Star Wars? I mean, it is historical, isn't it? Because it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So technically, it's historicals or ancients. So yeah, I'm going to go and do some historical reenacting with my lightsaber. That's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going to pitch that to my family and friends. Bye. But then you might get like, oh, I've got a weird rainbow blade here. Probably in this lighting you can't even see the colours, but let's hope you can. Ooh, it's quite bright though. It's very bright. You turn all the lights off at night time. Really, really brightens up the room. But yes, it is. Oh, I don't know what I did there. Has it died? I think it's died. I think I've killed it. Oh no.